Reeducated by grace, Paul's early ministry and Antioch. A little bit of background before we jump in here. What are the two main churches that are talked about in the book of Acts? What is the difference between the two? That same doctrine. I don't want to be
Jewish and Gentile.
Jewish and Gentile. And which one's Jewish and which one's Gentile?
Antioch is Gentile.
Jerusalem is Jewish and Antioch is Gentile. Now, why does that cause tension?
Circumcision. What did it follow?
Circumcision is going to be a big one. Just traditions,
What did it follow?
right? Traditions.
Follow all.
Things of that nature. Now we know a little bit about Paul and a little bit about his unique background. He's going to be the main apostle to the Gentiles. Why is he uniquely qualified to be a bridge between the church in Jerusalem and the church in Antioch? Why is he uniquely qualified?
He knows the Gentile culture.
He does because he grew up where?
Tarsus.
A thoroughly Gentile town, southern Turkey, along the Great Silk Route. Was it a little backstop or was it a pretty good sized city?
Good size.
Good sized. Yes, had a big library. I think Tarsus had one of the largest libraries in the ancient world. So that kind of makes sense. So he grows up in a Gentile town. Did he work in a predominantly Jewish business or Gentile business? Gentile. What was his profession?
Tent making.
Tent making. That's correct. And a lot of times people think that Paul was dirt poor. He was not. He had money. He was a Roman citizen. He understands athletics. I think I made a comment on Sunday school that we learn a lot about Jesus from his parables. Right? You kind of follow the line backwards. You do a little CSI, and the parables he tells are things that he knows. He knows how to hire and fire people. He's a small business owner. Jesus was a small business owner. He's a contractor up in Galilee, in predominantly Gentile area. Jewish, but a lot of Gentiles. It's a better word. And so he understands a lot of that. Paul is similar. He's not a small business owner. He's got a pretty sized operation. Who was his main customer? Roman military, yeah, for canvas and tents, right? Military contractor, military business. Okay. And so he understands that. He understands athletics. So he uses those analogies. He understands philosophy. He'll use that occasionally. Okay. So Paul is educated. And we also know he has money because nobody could have been a full-time student unless you're well-to-do. Unless you have a son who's still in medical school and still leans on mom and dad occasionally. Okay, which is fine. But again, when you're an academic, it's a unique place to be. Paul wanders into Jerusalem. He is a student of who? Which rabbi? Gamaliel, okay, who is the grandson of Hillel. And the two great ancient rabbis were Hillel and Shammai. Hillel was a little more progressive, a little more grace-filled. Shammai was a little more legalistic and hardcore. And so Paul's initial education is kind of in that more open environment, okay, if that makes any sense. I don't want to get into the word, conservative and liberal because that doesn't make sense in Judaism, okay. A little bit more less strict with the Torah, a little bit more open about the Torah. He's also a Pharisee. What do we know about the Pharisees? And I know they're not fair, you see. I like the kids' song, right? What's the problem with Pharisees? What was their agenda? No, let's back that up. Their concern is the nation. They see themselves as the Marine Corps of the Torah. Somebody's got to keep this, because if we get lazy and lackadaisical on keeping the Torah, what happens to the nation? Jews never think about themselves first. They always think about the nation first. It's hard for Americans to understand that. And the land, the land, the land. The covenant is the land, right? Not the best land, but the land. This is what God's given us, so we got to work with it. But what happens if how do you lose the land according to the covenant that God established with the Jews?
They don't follow God.
You don't follow the Torah. That's it. As a nation, you no longer follow God's law and you start following your law. And so why? So what do all Jews want to do at this time? Get rid of the Romans. Kick out these Romans, these Gentiles, these Goy, right? These uncircumcised barbarians. We want to have our own rule, like the Maccabean period, right? And so, how do you? And in order for that to happen, you got to get Messiah to come. Now, there's the question: how do we get Messiah to come? And that's the argument. So some say you raise an army, and when you got an army, Messiah will come and lead an army. Some believe that. They were Jewish preppers. They recently found a big stash of Roman swords in the Holy Land, hidden in a cave. And they were hidden by Jewish revolutionaries. And then he said there was like 25 or 30 of them. They just hid them in case you needed them, right? So they were doing that. That was one argument. The other argument was get along by going along with the Romans. God will protect us. That's the Sadducees, right? Compromise, compromise, compromise. The third argument was basically we keep Torah, keep the people accountable, and then Messiah will come because we'll be worthy. Right? He's not going to show up until we are worthy of him to show up. And that's sort of the Pharisee argument. Now, there's a fourth thing, and that is this question. Not how do we get Messiah to come, but maybe how does God bring Messiah? Right? So instead of us trying to pray God into our plan, what is the other flip? Maybe we need to pray ourselves into what? God's plan. Oh, that's so simple. No, it's not, because now you're getting into this wrestling with self, right? Okay. So basically, that's sort of the Pharisee argument. And why is Jesus of Nazareth, who's just a small business owner who declares himself a rabbi, why is he absolutely dangerous, according to Saul pre-road to Damascus experience?
Masses were flocking to
Thank you. Masses loved him. Why is that?
because he preached the good news
And what was the good news?
that they would have life eternal and they were blessed.
They already, most Jews already believed they had life eternal. What was the good news for these people? God has not left you behind. Torah is not strict, it breathes. God understands, he gets it, right? So instead of saying, thou shalt not, no. What, it's always interesting when you're raising children and you hit about 2, and one of the first words they learn is what?
No.
They don't learn yes. They learn no. And if you discipline them, I've seen children, they'll go to the dog and go, no. They're always sort of working down. Why do we love legalism?
It gives us control over others.
We think.
For ourselves. Or we think if I just work hard enough, God will accept me. Right? And does that work?
No.
Well, yeah. Guilt is a powerful tool. Powerful tool. In fact, we just watched a really bad movie about that, didn't we? So now we're trying to watch this movie and we're like, oh, this could be a really good movie. And then it just went, we should have turned it off, shouldn't we? You went to bed, I kept watching. No, you finished it, didn't you? Okay, all right. But again, the idea is we're attracted to legalism. It seems right, but that's not how God works. Okay, but you got to remember, it's all about the land, And so when Paul is converted, when Saul is converted, I didn't say he's converted to Paul, it's the same name, different language. What changes for him? We talk about this a lot. What does he not stop doing? What does he stop?
He doesn't stop being a Jew.
Yes. If anybody ever tells you that Paul stopped being a Jew after the road to Damascus, please correct them.
He just stopped being a Pharisee.
Yes. And why was that so hard to put down?
Well, it was his identity. The other thing he did, he continued to pray like throughout his letters. He states, prays continuously, incessantly for people, for everything.
Yeah. And I want to say something about Paul. Paul doesn't really stop being Paul. He still can write pretty direct. He has a temper. He's sometimes difficult to get along with. He can be very grumpy. At the same time, he can be incredibly compassionate. He can be incredibly broken. And he can be very accommodating. He is, guess what? Just like you and like me. He has good days and bad days. He's approachable, but we don't make him approachable because we think he's a saint. No, he is a saint like you. He's also a sinner like you. And this will come out in his theology and his writings and his lifestyle. So he still has Torah in his head and zeal in his heart, but the change is the Torah is still in his head. That's going to have to get reworked. Zeal in his heart goes from being the Pharisee to the apostle sent out of Antioch to the Gentiles. Okay? That's all in a snapshot at this point. Any questions about that before we dive in?
So in a sense, he really doesn't stop being a Pharisee because in his letters, he is oftentimes, counseling these churches he set up that have gone different directions. He says, you've gotten off the path, so you've got to go back to where I taught you.
He stops being a Pharisee of the law, but he still has that Phariseeism for the gospel. He's he's uniquely qualified, and he writes very passionately. He's not a marshmallow, and I think that's a good observation. And again, sometimes with Paul, he says things in writing, we're like, oh, did he just say that? But at the same time, it's logos, right? And that's good parenting. That's good preaching. It's good theology. And I think it's good practice in life. But yeah, he does show up every now and then, and you got to kind of be ready for that. Paul gets a lot of criticism saying that he was against women, but at the same time, he recognizes women doing very good industry, and most of his funding outside of his own funds came from women. So Paul's a very interesting guy all the way around. So you got to kind of keep it in that proper context. If you try to put Paul in one box, you'll fail. That's the biggest struggle with Paul. Okay? And when he writes different letters, he's addressing different issues with different churches at different times. So we try to synthesize his theology, but at the same time, it's very specific about what's going on at particular points. Okay? Okay. Let's get into reading Galatians chapter 1, verses 15 through 24. Here, Paul describes the time following his conversion and his time away from public ministry. Because we know he went away for a while. Again, he's got Torah in his head and zeal in his heart. Zeal in his heart's changed after the road to Damascus experience. But what has to get reworked in his brain?
Well, he's no longer officially a Pharisee from Tarsus who trained under Gamaliel.
The other thing is, how did I miss all this? Right? I mean, God showed up with Messiah and I missed it. Where did I miss it? how did I miss it? And he's gonna go back and relook at that.
So maybe Gamaliel isn't as smart as he thought he was. I mean, but he was the person that, that he identified with.
Yeah, I don't think Gamaliel would have said, I'm a smart guy. I think that Gamaliel would have been the keeper of his grandfather's school of theology that was getting passed down. I don't think rabbis say, oh, I'm the smartest guy in the room. Because one thing you got to understand about Judaism is, again, this is very hard for us Americans to understand. What happens when, particularly in Protestantism, what happens when a group of people no longer agree on something in the scriptures?
They break
And they break off.
Yeah.
And we go start another church. Right? That's why, First Baptist, Second Baptist, Third Baptist, right? And that's the old joke. How do Baptists plant churches? They get mad at one another. I've heard that story. But in reality, the way that Jews look at something is they'll say the scripture is true. They don't disagree with that. But we're all looking at it from our perspective, and we're arguing about saying what does this mean and how do we apply it. But the scripture, the Torah itself, is true. And so you could have one person over here that says, a rabbi that's a liberal, right? That says, oh, we're supposed to do this, 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 and this. And then over here you have a conservative that says, no, we're supposed to do this, 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 and this. And they have a discussion, but the one thing they agree upon and never stop agreeing upon is they're Jewish. They don't break fellowship just because they have a theological disagreement. They go share a beer with one another instead. But in Protestantism, particularly in the West, we divide if we feel like you have to agree. Okay? It's called midrash, just discussing the scriptures. And I said, if you have a difference of opinion on the scripture, I have no problem with that. I'm just giving a commentary. I could be wrong. I can be corrected. I even reserve the right to change my opinion. And I have over time. Okay? Fair enough? So let's get into it. Somebody read from that section.
But when he who had set me apart before I was born, and who called me by his grace, was pleased to reveal his son to me in order that I might preach him among the Gentiles, I did not immediately consult with anyone, nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me, but I went away to Arabia and returned again to Damascus. Then after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to visit Cephas and remained with him 15 days. But I saw none of the other apostles except James, the Lord's brother. In what I am writing to you before God, I do not lie. Then I went into the regions of Syria and Cilicia and was still unknown in person to the churches of Judea that are in Christ. They only were hearing it said, he who used to persecute is now preaching the faith he once tried to destroy, and they glorified God because of me.
Okay, so the first question, somebody read for me the first question, please. Lesson number 5, question number 1.
According to Galatians 1, what does Paul say God did before he was born, and how does this frame Paul's calling?
So what does it mean? So what does he say about what God was doing before he was born?
That God had set him apart.
Okay, yeah, let's discuss this for a moment. Jack had asked me to do a little bit of writing on predestination and free will. Is that okay to say that, Marilyn? Jack, I did. And so the first article says what in the Apostles' Creed? What does the first article of the Apostles' Creed say? I believe in God the Father Almighty, what?
Maker of heaven and earth.
Now, what does that mean? It means that he made you uniquely. When, according to the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, when did he make you?
At conception.
At conception. Why do we believe that, even scientifically? And this has come up in the pregnancy with my daughter-in-law and my son. All your DNA is locked in, is it not? How tall you're going to be, whether you like peas or not. Right? Whether you're gifted at math or you're gifted at English. Predispositions toward these illnesses. She was checked at what, 12 weeks? They did a DNA test. Right?
No.
Later. Okay, but they did a DNA test and they also knew the sex of the baby. So they know all of that now, right? Isn't that amazing that they're able to go in so early and sort of see all that stuff, right? So from a scientific standpoint, when did you really become you?
That's that consumption.
At conception. Because it's all locked in. Is it not? Right? If you just leave the seed alone, it hopefully will grow. Right? And that kind of the goal. You want to be good soil. Right? My youngest, who's in medical school, he said he really enjoyed delivered babies. And I said, because women today wait longer to have children, and they're extremely motivated if they want to have children. Why is that?
Their clock
I
is
want them.
Well, yes and no, right? We have so many tools now to not have a pregnancy, right? That if you do want to get pregnant, and it does come later, and that's fine, that now, okay, it's my time, right? And and so he goes, the women who want to have a baby usually are extremely motivated to have that baby in this generation. It's really an interesting dynamic shift, right? Whereas, maybe 100 years in the past, where the woman went to the doctor and he goes, you're pregnant, and she's delivery number 7, and she starts crying. Nowadays, you say you're pregnant, and they start crying, not tears of regret, but tears of joy. It's changed. We've had a pivot post birth control and post abortion of babies. It's an interesting culture paradigm shift. Okay. So with that said, let's go back to the concept of predestination. What does predestination mean when it comes to the first article of the creed? I was not conceived and born by accident, but by design. By design. Very important, right? There's a purpose, there's a mission, and again, the good, the bad, and the ugly about you.
Well, how does that work on the other end of your life? Are we predestined to die?
Well, you're predestined to die because you're conceived because you're born into sin.
On January 1st or December 29th?
Well,
Is that
I think your end date is a combination of genetics and lifestyle. I think there's more to the end date than just simply that's it, you're done. Sweep up the
God
floor.
doesn't know when that is?
He does, but well, I think he knows, but he doesn't control.
Could you explain that further?
Okay, it's raising children. You have a pretty good idea of who your children are. You raise them a certain way, but you turn them loose to take on the world on their own. I can remember when I was told my mom, I go, Mom, I'm going to go to the seminary. And my mom goes, oh, that doesn't surprise me. I said, why does that not surprise you? She goes, because you've always had an interest in God and theology and things of that nature. She just kind of knew that was a predisposition for me. But to say we're just lobotomized Christian zombies in baptism and free will is gone. God has a plan, but that plan is not, it's like writing a book. You have a sort of a destination for the end of the book, but how you kind of get there is not like the Holy Spirit is micromanaging you through the process. Yes.
Got a question. It might be very temperamental type question because it happened last weekend. But the children that died at Camp Mystic, do you believe, if somehow Susie Q stayed home because her parents said, no, we couldn't afford the camp this year, you're going to stay home, she did not perish. But by going to there You know, God knows our date of death, but you can't change that, is what I'm getting at. No matter what the parent had done, if that parent had kept Susie home, somehow Susie could have died in a car accident being at home with her family when they went out for ice cream. You understand where
Yeah,
I'm coming from?
yeah, yeah.
Is that a true statement that your day of death is known, and it is known by God, of course, but we as parents or humans, we can't change that.
I think it's more like, there's this movie about these kids cheated death, and now death is trying to track them down and take them out.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that.
There's a new one out on the theater right now, like death got cheated, and so death is aggressively now trying to kill them in any way that they possibly can. I don't think that our date of death is so fixed that it can't be manipulated. The scriptures are very clear about prayer, and like, so for example, the unjust judge and the widow who keeps pounding on the door until finally he says fine, and even though he's not just, he comes down and gives her what she wants because she's so persistent. God does allow a certain amount of influence on our part about our lives and where it's going. We also know that from the Old Testament, and I remember the handwriting on the wall, right? You know, your date is fixed, and then, you know, you can go into sackcloth and ashes, and then God sort of relents and says, okay, I'll work with that and delay that. That shows up with Elijah, another example. You know, Ahab and Jezebel. That actually showed up in our reading today, last Sunday, but I didn't dive into that rabbit hole. You had to go back and read it. Micaiah is a minor prophet, but Elijah's not, right? Elijah is constantly battling Ahab and Jezebel's giving him fits. She wants his head, and she's killing everybody, and all the prophets of Yahweh, and he runs. And he goes to the mountain and he hides in the cleft. And basically, God comes to him and says, what are you doing, Elijah? Why are you here? The same question is given to Hagar when she's put out by Sarah. And I love the question. Hagar, where have you come from? Where are you going? And why are you here? And in the case of Elijah says, because everybody's dead. She's killed them all. And if I stay, I'm done. I can't go there. I'm tired, Lord. I'm done. And he goes, I still have work for you to do. He gives it to him. And he says, go back and finish the task that I have in store for you. Right? So basically, God still has tasks. But in order for it to get done, we become participators in the endeavor. So I think that what we need to understand when it comes to predestination and free will is we live in this tension between what God desires and what we desire and what he has in store for our lives and how we're trying to fill that out. Because what happens is, let's say you never become a believer. And you get to the day of judgment, and you're not going with the wheat, you're going to the weeds. And God said, you never fulfilled what I created you for. Because it was your choice. Let's go back to the demons. Some people, I just wrote this, some people would rather rule their reign in their own private hell than submit to the grace of God. It's a choice. So yeah, does God know what's coming up? Yeah, but is that malleable to some extent? The answer is yes. Because if I'm smoking away, I'm shortening my life. Not trying to be mean to anybody who smokers. That's one of the risks, is it not? We all know that. Right? But if you go to the doctor and the doctor says, if you don't stop drinking, smoking, and lose 50 pounds, you're going to be dead in a year. And suddenly the guy quits drinking, quits smoking, loses the 50 pounds, and he lives another 10 years. Did that affect God's predestination for him? Yes. Of course it did. Okay. So I guess what we get caught up on is, oh, these children did not have a choice. Yeah, they did. There was a choice. It's tragic. It's awful. Jesus tells the story that this tower fell down on this group of people, and the question is asked. They said, Rabbi, who's to blame for that? God or them? They must have been sinners, right? And God says, no, it just happened. And you take that as a warning. You never know when your life is going to be done. So you know what? Get about the business of grace today. That the only thing we really need to focus on is today. That's really all it is. When we pray the prayer, give us this day our daily bread, what is the time frame of that prayer?
Today.
What is a day? A yom. What is a day? 24 hours. Because if we take care of the days, then the weeks, the months, and the years take care of themselves. So I don't know if I've answered your question. I probably didn't. Listen, there's a tension between predestination and free will because we have a tendency to lean one way or the other. What I do want to make sure that we understand is God is not turning you into an actor in his play and you have no choice. At the same time, I don't want you to say God does not have a plan for your life and that your choices don't matter. We as Lutherans live in the tension between predestination and free will. And it's tension. Am I fulfilling God's will for me? What is that will? I don't know. I need to make choices. So what happens is, hopefully, when we get into the covenant or baptism, when we wrestle with God in the Lord's Prayer on a daily basis, then what we do is we get some perspective about God, where God wants us to go. A good example of that is when we came here. Was it a little bit of a risk for some of you and I to come here? Was it a little bit of a risk for you guys to choose me as your pastor?
Sure.
You didn't vet everything, did you? Okay. So I didn't really, but it's tragic that they drowned. But at the same time, any day, something could happen. Whose fault is it? I remember I was in the hospital with a blood clot after surgery, and the doctor goes, "You're going to be in the hospital for 6 days." And I said, "I don't have time to be in the hospital for 6 days." And he goes, "It doesn't matter. You're in the hospital for 6 days." And I go, "Then how did I get this blood clot? What did I do wrong?" And you know what he said? "You got a blood clot. Doesn't matter how you got it. You're in the hospital for 6 days, dude. Get over it." And I had to submit, and we were moving, and it was awful. I was like, "I don't have time for this. You're going to make time for this. Lord, why did you give me this blood clot?" God didn't give me that blood clot. I got a blood clot. I just had to deal with the side effects. And he goes, "You want to get up and walk around? You'll be dead in 24 hours because it's going to go to your heart. You're going to have a pulmonary embolism and you're going to be dead. Is that what you want?" I think I'll stay in the hospital for 6 days. Amen.
You took the advice of a professional.
But a lot of people don't take the advice of the pastors or the scripture.
There you go.
Okay, enough said. That's enough of my rant. I probably didn't answer your question, but that's.
Oh, you did.
I mean, no, listen, I want to make something. There's no. If I had the perfect answer to predestination, we wouldn't have Methodists and Presbyterians. But Presbyterians have a tendency to lean more towards the predestination side, and Methodists have a tendency to lean more towards the free will side. So if I was so smart to have it all figured out, I would bring the Presbyterians and the Methodists together, and I would be happy, right? Everybody happy. I remember taking it at the seminary, and the professor said, "You're never going to," he goes, "You'll think you got this, and then you don't have this." All right, next question, please.
Why does Paul emphasize that he didn't immediately consult with others or go to Jerusalem after his conversion?
What do you think?
I wrote to prove that his gospel did not depend on any humans.
Why is that so
Oh.
important? It's great. That's a great answer.
It's
Why-
probably on the notes or something.
No. Well, why do you think it was so important for Paul to not say, I got this from some human being?
Because it is from God. Everyone thinks it's from like, get your advice from Sonia or from Tom or whatever, but it is from God. If
What-
we listen to him.
It gives him the biggest thing that Paul had to deal with his entire ministry was, well, you were with him. You're no apostle. Who do you think you are? You're a Johnny come lately. You're the blister that shows up after all the hard work stuff. Who do you think you are? And so Paul always has to legitimize his ministry by his authority. So what does he say? How does he legitimize it? I didn't go and study Rabbi Shammai or Hillel or whatever. I got this from where?
Jesus himself.
Jesus himself. Me and the Torah, a lot of prayer and fasting, and wrestling, writing, scratching and deleting. Right? The hardest thing about writing, I will tell you, the hardest thing about writing is two things. Number one is knowing your audience. And number two is not the writing. It's the edit. Edit hard. Because do I leave that? Do I keep that? Does it sound right? So if I'm going to write something, who do I bounce it all off of? Yeah, I bounce it off something. She goes, I like that. I said, okay, I don't like that. Why do you not like that? See? Okay. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Excellent answer. Number 3. Somebody.
What might Paul have been doing during his time in Arabia and Damascus? Why is the period important?
Yeah, what was he doing? He was playing video games. He was playing golf.
He was rereading the Torah, I suspect, from a different perspective.
Yeah, I would. That's good. That's good. I'll stick with that. He's reading and contemplating. When we pray the Lord's Prayer, how are we supposed to pray the Lord's Prayer? How quickly can I get this over so I can get on with my day? How are we supposed to pray the Lord's Prayer? At least according to how Jesus taught it. Slow down, stop, pause, park, ponder. There you go. All those P's, right?
Stop.
I stole that. Listen, I didn't make that up. I stole that from another pastor, so I can't claim that. I heard that from a black preacher. I'm like, oh, that's.
So he was being instructed by God, whereas before he was being instructed by Gamaliel.
Yes, he didn't go to another theological
No, what does
school.
Gamaliel know? Who was he?
What does Gamaliel know?
Basically-
What's that?
Basically, who does
That
not
Gamaliel.
believe him? Anybody? Why is he so?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and he has to constantly defend. Never is.
But he
Oh, you went to Fort Wayne, not St. Louis. You gotta. You're gonna have to get hooked up on the computer. Okay. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. Next question, please.
How long did it take Paul before? How long did it take before Paul visited the apostles in Jerusalem, and what does that suggest about the slow unfolding of his public ministry?
How long did it take?
3 years.
3 years. Why 3 years?
He was prepared. Prepared.
The apostles took 3 years of teaching from Jesus.
I like that. I think he feels that you get to walk my dog at some time because sorry.
What kind of a dog? Is he a big dog?
She's a
Mean dog?
nice dog.
Okay.
Okay. The idea is that he has to have legitimacy. How do I get legitimacy? They got 3 years to sit at the master's feet. So that's part of it. I think that's part of it. What is the danger when somebody begins to preach and teach too quickly after becoming a Christian? What's the danger?
That you get wrong information.
That is exactly right. We
Which
become the
is-
blind leading the blind. The question has been asked, and I think it's a fair, legitimate question. Do all Lutheran pastors need to be theologians? That's a good question. And that is the question that's being asked right now. Do all Lutheran pastors need to be theologians? Or do they just need to be pastors? All I can say is for myself, I'm glad that the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod considers me a theologian. I'm glad for that. Thank you. Okay. All right, let's see here. Next question, please.
What is the significance of Paul's long preparation period? What does this teach us about spiritual growth and readiness?
Yeah, okay, so let's go back to the concept of how we approach baptism, the raising of children, and when they get to a point of adult decisions, or at least semi-adult decisions. Who's responsible for the raising of a child theologically until they hit confirmation?
Parents.
Parents, church, and baptismal sponsors. See.
Isn't it originally the father?
Hmm?
Father primarily?
The Luther has a tendency to throw the fathers under the bus as the head
Too
of
many
the house.
times the mothers take over because the fathers fail in their duty.
But let me go back to the parallels between how we work with children and how the Jews work with children. And I know this is not a perfect one for one, but they'd be circumcised on the 8th day. They would be, raised up in the covenant. They would go to Torah or synagogue. They would go through a lectionary. They would hear the scriptures read. They would hear it expounded upon. They spent a whole day in the synagogue, right? They didn't just like run gun 1 hour. Hey, he's getting too long in the pulpit. They'd eat together. They would share together. They would relax together. They would rest together. They would turn off technology. We're a generation begging for Shabbat, for Sabbath. And in the process, the mothers around 6 or 7 would be the ones that taught the girls and the boys to read Hebrew. And then the men were, so there was a team effort that happened, that the father was sort of the one responsible to get them ready. And so instead of just handing them over to the rabbi, whether they were going through their bar mitzvah, daughter of the law, or bar mitzvah, son of the law, and say, okay, rabbi, fix them. Well, what do they know? Well, they don't know anything, but they were baptized. They were circumcised. I am of the opinion that if they are not ready to be confirmed at junior high, it's not a rite of passage. It's not like you hit a certain age and now you have to go through confirmation. That was a pain in the tail. LaDonna knows what I'm talking about. Sorry for that, LaDonna. I was just sick and tired of drop and go parents. Here they are, fix them, take them through confirmation. Well, your child's not ready, but you're going to put them through confirmation because all their friends are going through it. This is the age. Fix them. Where have you been for the last 10 years? So I think that, but with that said, we want to properly educate and work with children and families as they go along. Okay. The biggest 2 points you're going to hit with kids is right around 7. I think that's the age of reason. For me, I think that's a great opportunity for First Communion. And then you hit it again. Yeah.
Can you see this? It's something that's been put out now by the Synod. It's
Okay.
catechism memory cards, one at a time. It's meant for kids, but all of us ladies took one because we need it too.
Cool. So the idea when they hit confirmation is then they are now ready to sit down with and as Seth said, they need a third person. They need somebody besides mom and dad. I agree with that. But then you get them ready and then you confirm them and you get them through. That's the goal. That's the ideal goal. Confirmation and is really tricky. And I'm not good, but it takes time. It's not a one and done. It takes time. Okay. Next question, please. Number 5.
What is the significance of Paul's long preparation period? What does this teach us about spiritual growth and readiness?
And what does it teach? And whose time? Our time or God's time?
Our times.
What is the three answers to prayer? Yes, no, and
Not now.
Wait,
wait.
wait.
Which is the hardest?
wait.
Why is wait so hard?
Because we're used to everything being right now.
You know, the child that's in Walmart that, you know, mom and dad, I think, teased him by taking him through the toy section just to let him melt down. And what is the children saying? But I what? I love it. It's not I want it, I need it. I love that. And they're just melting down. And by the way, it's boys and girls that go through that, right? Saw that the other day. This little girl's just stomping her face. Oh, I need it. And mom's like, come on, right? So why do we sometimes need spiritual growth and readiness over a long period of time?
I mean, we're always on the journey, right?
Yeah, I agree. If you're going to be a teacher, you need to be a student, right? Okay, good. So God might be saying, he's not punishing you by saying, wait. Maybe he's preparing you for something greater. Never know. Okay. Number 6.
In Acts 9, how is Paul's preaching in Damascus received? And what do the Jews' reactions tell us about the radical nature of his transformation?
So let's go read Acts 9, verses 19 through 30. Somebody read that one, please.
In taking food, he was strengthened. For some days, he was with the disciples in Damascus. And immediately he proclaimed Jesus in the synagogue, saying, He is the Son of God. And all who heard him were amazed and said, Is not this the man who made havoc in Jerusalem of those who called upon this name? And has he not come here for this purpose, to bring them bound before the chief priests? But Saul increased all the more in strength and confounded the Jews who lived in Damascus by proving that Jesus was the Christ. And when many days had passed, the Jews plotted to kill him, but their plot became known to Saul. They were watching the gates day and night in order to kill him, but his disciples took him by night and let him down through an opening in the wall, lowering him in a basket. And when he had come to Jerusalem, he attempted to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, for they did not believe he was a disciple. But Barnabas took him and brought him to the disciples and declared to them how on the road he had seen the Lord who spoke to him, and how at Damascus he had preached boldly in the name of Jesus. So he went in and out among them at Jerusalem, preaching boldly in the name of the Lord. And he spoke and disputed against the Hellenists, but they were seeking to kill him. And when the brothers learned this, they brought him down to Caesarea and sent him off to Tarsus.
Okay, there's a little bit of things going on here. First of all, I love this irony that the very people he was getting ready to go kill, he's going to live with. You ever pick that up, right? Yeah, he's come to kill me, and now we're housing him. One of the original articles in the Constitution is the military allowed to house soldiers in your home? Yes or no? I guess you did, but he's your son. You have no choice. No, it's not. You're not allowed to house foreign troops. Okay. The idea here is that it's hard for former enemies to become friends. What was the brilliance of the Marshall Plan after World War II? What was the brilliance of it?
We helped our enemies instead of putting them down. We helped them rise up.
Yeah. And, I mean, Europe was, particularly Germany, had already industrialized into a Western format. Even Japan had already done that in the late 19th century, going into the 20th century. So that was already a done deal. We tried it with the first Gulf War. That was George Bush's plan to go do that with Iraq. Why did it fail, do you think?
Different culture, they're Muslim. They don't like us at all.
Yeah, this generation, maybe too soon. Why were we able to eventually turn South Korea into a strong Western ally and the Philippines? And I'm using General Bolger's book, Why We Lost, because we were able to stay for a long period of time. It took a generation, right? The problem is we went to try to flip a nation that wasn't ready for what we were selling, right? So we win the war, we won the battles, we lost the war. That's his argument. I think it's a fair analogy. But what is the brilliance and the contradiction here of having the former enemy now being housed by the people he was trying to kill, and now they have to work? What's the beauty of this? Why would God do something crazy like this?
To try to bring us together as a nation.
Help as a church. Well, you're right. It's a nation. I believe we're a colony of heaven on earth. So the idea here is that God can be with anyone, right? And also they had to build trust. What is the whole Ronald Reagan concept of peace? They're trust by verification. Trust by verification. Okay. So basically, but Barnabas is not his name, it's his nickname. Remember I mentioned that last week? Anybody remember what his name was?
Joseph.
Joseph, yeah, Joseph. What does Barnabas mean? Here, I'll give you half of it. Bar, son.
Of encouragement.
Encourager. Yeah.
Son of encouragement. He was the son of encouragement. That's his gift, right? So basically they send in, it's like send in Barnabas. He can help build the bridge, because what's going on? They don't trust Saul. Maybe he's gotten sneaky and now he's going to be a spy. In the books of history right now, particularly 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, Absalom declares himself king in Hebron. He's marching up with an army to Jerusalem. David flees. David's on the run. Ahithophel is Bathsheba's grandfather, is advising David. Ahithophel has been waiting a very long time to have David's head. And David, in his brilliance, as he's fleeing the city, turns to his palace manager and says, "Go back and spy for me. Slow him down, because he's got the mojo." So he goes back. I gotta remember it's not Hiram. I can't think of the name. But anyways, he goes back, and sure enough, Ahithophel's first advice to Absalom is set up a tent, take the 10 concubines that were left behind to manage the royal palace, David's concubines, and do well. It's being recorded. It's in the scriptures. Behind the tent, what do you do? I'll be kind. Take it. Take them all. And he does. It's an insult. Right? It's an insult for two things. I'm younger than you. I got the mojo, not you, old man. Right? After it's done, he comes down and says, "Now what?" Ahithophel says, "Go get him, and get him now." The court advisor says, "Slow down, young man. Take time. And David's able to get away and rebuild himself and come back. Retake the city. The idea here is that you need time, that sometimes you need to test the spirit, trust by verification of what is taking place. They're afraid that David is trying to be that spy inside the church. Because if they're hiding, then I need to be able to boot them out. Right? That's the concern. And so they send in Barnabas, and I can't imagine. Can you imagine Barnabas saying, "Hey, we got a job. Really? What do you got? What do you got in store for me? I want you to go to Damascus, and you know what? Check out this Saul guy. Didn't he just try to kill everybody? Yeah, but we want you to go check him out."
Well, just like you were recruited by Holy Land, Paul was recruited by Barnabas. He was called by Barnabas.
He was specifically given a mission by God in order to build up the church. Yeah. Barnabas is a good player. But what's funny is Paul goes on the first missionary journey with Barnabas, and then they get into an argument. How do you get into an argument with the son of encouragement?
That's the way Paul is.
Yeah.
That's his arguments.
But it's over a family because it's over his nephew, John Mark, who ran back to mama and left and didn't make Paul very happy. Okay. Next question, please.
Why were the disciples in Jerusalem afraid of Paul, and how did Barnabas help bridge the gap?
There you go. Very answer. Why are they afraid of him? Up until now, what's he been trying to do?
Kill him.
Kill him. Yeah. I'd be afraid of him too. Right? How does Barnabas help bridge the gap? Some people are really good at reading people's character. I told you when I was at a correctional officer, I told this to the elders. I told you that story about how they would test inmates. I learned from a correctional officer, if you ask questions, you control the conversation. Person asking the questions controls the conversation. So you bring an inmate over and go, "Hey man, what you got in your pocket?" And the inmate goes, pull it out, and "Hey, I got some bread. I'm taking it out of the chow hall to go back and make sandwiches." "All right, keep on rolling." You go, "What you got in your pocket?" "What do you mean what I got in my pocket?" "All right." He's lying because he's getting defensive. Now he's going to get a pat down. And he's got 50 pounds of cheese strapped to him because he's trying to make burritos back in the unit. Okay? I saw it all the time. I said, "How did you know that guy had 50 pounds of cheese strapped to his body?" And he goes, "Because I asked the question." I said, "Man, you are like Nostradamus in prison." He goes, "No, I'm just really good at asking questions to see reaction." Some people are really good at that kind of stuff. Okay? Their BS meter is very sensitive. Barbara Streisand. Okay? Okay. Sorry, Claire. Hey, this is being recorded. Okay? So about 5 more minutes and we'll be done. Next question, please.
What role does Barnabas play in Paul's early ministry? And how does this encourage us to value encouragers and bridge builders in the church?
Oh, let's talk about Barnabas. Why do we need people like this?
Because they're like mediators between two people. They listen and give advice.
What happens when you get into systems? The church is based on a family system. Family structure is the system of the church. What's going to happen when you get people in group and you're trying to get something accomplished? Are you going to have differences of opinion?
Sure.
Why do you always need people with it's called the balcony perspective? Why do you need people who can sit back and look at the big picture and bridge the gap? Why is that important?
Because they're not involved in the family, so they can see outside.
Correct. I totally agree with that. I expect conflicts inside the church. I don't want divisions, but a certain level of conflict is okay, of a difference of opinion. The catch here is, what happens if the pastor becomes part of the system? he loses,
Perspective.
yes, he can't be that Barnabas, right? So the idea is that we sit back and so we can help the family system move forward instead of being in the system and being controlled by the system. Does that make sense? Now, by the way, that's old school pastor. Old school. I mean, like 50 years ago, the guys that I cut my teeth with, that I should have listened to my first 5 years out coming out of the seminary. That is very important. Why is it important for you to sometimes keep perspective, let's say, when it comes to your kids in the church, in your family? We run into this, Sonia run into this all the time. My two boys are now married. Do daughter-in-laws have an influence on your sons? Yes, they do. I tell Sonia all the time, they're the gatekeeper, not anymore, right? And so there's these dynamics that shift and play. As parents, I have learned to try to sit back and try to be a Barnabas instead of telling them what they need to do. I've heard it said this way: when they're little, you're a caregiver. When they're a teenager, you're a coach. When they're out of your house, you're a counselor. What is the role of the counselor?
Listen, wait until they ask for help.
Or just give advice, but say, I'm not telling you what to do. Right? At the end of the day, it's your life and you're going to have to make those decisions yourself, right? Here's the hard part, though. How about elderly parents?
Well, it's kind of a backwards timeline. In other words, you're treating them as young adults, teenagers, children.
I agree. And it's hard. It's hard. It's very hard. And it's hard for the elderly parents because what are they doing? They're giving up independence and control. That's, Darcy, you are knee deep in both of it. It's hard. But you have to be that perspective, right? Okay. All right. Any comments on that?
So Barnabas was like a prophet sent by God. He has an outside view of what's going on,
Well,
and he was
the traditional role of the prophet and the priest is the prophet is the prosecutor and the priest is the defense.
you can start in your Sunday sermon, somebody from the outside that isn't part of the system looking at an overall view.
You're correct, but let me take an exception to it, okay? You are correct. I think an outside person can be prophetic, but they could also be priestly. Prophet is law, priest is gospel. You have both tools in your toolbox, law, gospel, right? Prophet and priest. And so what's happening is that in the case of the dysfunction, and that's what I was trying to say, is prophets begin to show up when the dysfunction begins to increase, right?
So Barnabas was more like a New Testament prophet, more in grace than in the law.
He's both, Tom. He's
Okay.
both. He's both. He can, and just like you can. So let's say, for example, here out on 540. Let's say we have a problem with people not obeying the traffic laws and they have a bunch of wrecks. And then suddenly, or they're speeding, right? That becomes a hot spot for speeders who are causing wrecks. What are the police going to do?
So,
They're going to put in there and they're going to start watching that, right? And giving tickets, right? That's law. But what do you do when things are going right? Or you give, yeah, okay. So if a police officer pulls you over and he says, what's going to be the first question he's going to ask you? There's going to be 3 questions. I need your driver's license, proof of insurance and registration, and what else? And then he's going to ask a 3rd question.
Do you know why I pulled you?
Yeah, why does he ask that?
I don't know from experience.
Why
I've only heard that.
does he ask?
To see if you're aware of what.
Because if you tell him, then he's got you in court by your own confession. If you really don't want to play ball, you just say, I don't know why you're calling. he'll say, well, I pulled you over for speeding. What's gonna be the next question? Do you know how fast you were going? Why does he ask that question?
It's your state of mind, because there's other concerns.
Or he goes, it doesn't matter, go ahead and tell me, I got you on the radar gun anyways.
Yeah.
He's just asking you the question. He might not even have, if you go, well, I was doing 85, he might give you that because that he's got you on the confession, right? So he's asking the questions. He's giving you law. Barnabas is a son of encouragement, but you need law gospel sometimes to encourage people. Why is tough love so valuable?
People need to hear the truth, but then they need to know that it's okay.
But you warn people and then you encourage people when they get to that point, right? Again, going back to Tom. So I'm oversimplifying this, Tom, but people are sent in both sometimes to be prophetic and be priest. Sometimes you need to encourage. Sometimes you need to warn. So I wouldn't say he's a prophet. He is an ambassador of Christ. Sent. But he's there to figure it out, test it, and then give a report back. Okay. Did I answer that question? Okay. Let's see here. One last question, and then we'll be done for the day. We're running out of time.
Why do you think Paul's bold preaching in Jerusalem led to attempts on his life?
Yeah, why do you think Paul's bold preaching in Jerusalem? He comes right out of the gates. What are they? Who was the people who did not like his preaching? Which group?
The Jews.
Which group of the Jews?
The notes here
Yes,
say the
that's
Hellenists.
Okay, let's break that down. This is predominantly the Jews who had a tendency to lean towards the Greek culture.
Right.
They were the ones that were having issues. See, there's three ways that people approach the gospel: license, legalism, license, and liberty. Legalism is Phariseeism. Okay? Do not do this, do not do that. No, 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 no. License is, it doesn't matter what you do. God is love, and love is, it doesn't matter. And we'll just have little rainbows and sunshines and little unicorns running around. And we're all going to be fine. It's going to be okay. Because it's all about love. And by the way, I got my little crystal hanging off my car, and I'm channeling all this wonderful energy. Right? I can do whatever I want because I'm baptized and Christ doesn't care. That's license. Then there's liberty. And liberty means is you are free, but there's accountability to your freedom. Go back to the idea of free will. So you're free. You do have the ability to make decisions. But here's the question. Before you make the decision, who ought you check? Who should you check with? The one that set you free. Because Paul describes himself as a bondservant to Christ. I'm bonded. What's a bondservant? He uses the word slave, but I don't like the word slave because it's got all this nasty connotations. Never say, oh, you're a slave. Don't say that in prison. Watch black guys everywhere.
You work for someone for so long to get your freedom.
You're already free, but he's paid off your debts. And so now you bond yourself to him out of thanksgiving, right? It's kind of the, where you go, I'll go. Why? Peter says this. Everybody's leaving. They're all walking away in John's gospel. This is a hard teaching. He's talking about eating his flesh. He's drinking his blood. That was highly offensive to a Jewish community, was it not? It's cannibalism. And then he turns to the disciples and goes, are you going to leave too? What does Peter say? Where am I going to go? You have the words of your life. I'm a bondservant to you. I can't get this anywhere else. So where am I going to go? I don't want to sound cocky, but Donna, why are you on this Bible study?
Because I need it? Oh, no. Because I like you.
Oh,
What?
Well, I mean, you have other choices in Nebraska for Bible studies. Why sit in on mine?
Because I feel you're a teacher and I appreciate being taught a lot of the other things that go around and ahead and behind the word to help me understand what it means, whether at that time, back then, or now for me. You teach, you don't just preach at me.
And let me say this, and I'll close with this. Let me say something about LaDonna. LaDonna's nobody's fool. LaDonna is a very strong, opinionated, devout Lutheran woman who is nobody's fool and has a great BS meter inside of her. And when I first came rolling in, she didn't quite know what to think about me till time went on. And then it all kind of began to click together, right? So I guess what I'm saying is that sometimes you go where you need to go because you can't find it anywhere else. I have the same thing. I have people that I go back to again and again and again for my teaching because I just love their stuff. Okay. All right. Let's yes.
So I have a question. So we just talked about the Hellenists.
Yeah.
So they were Gentile.
Well, Helen,
Gentile culture.
I think early on in this is he's not. I'm going to unpack it a little bit more. There's two labels on the Hellenists. Some are just they were Gentiles who did not believe at all, and then others were Jews who were Hellenized. And so let me look at that. I'm going to take, at least for now, and I might change my opinion when we come back in 2 weeks, is his first group that he goes after. Somebody read that passage one more time.
But the reason for my question is because like talks about him preaching boldly to them. He spoke and disputed against the Hellenists. That's verse 29.
Okay.
But then I thought I read somewhere like in the part where it teaches you what the words mean when it says Hellenists. I know. And that says they easily went into falling for Jesus Christ, or not falling for him, but like they were easier to convince. I thought that's what it said.
Let me look at it, and you might be right.
But you can do that in 2 weeks. I don't want to keep.
No, I'm rolling on this, but let me.
I thought I read.
Yeah,
they actually were.
There's
more
again.
Accepting once he started preaching to them, they were like, okay, we're on board.
Well, here's what we know.
Okay.
Paul did not preach to non-God-fearing Gentiles. That was not a target group. His target group was always God-fearing Gentiles like Cornelius. People who were in the church but were unfortunately not part of the covenant. So, because they were not circumcised. And eventually over time, but he always goes into the synagogue to preach. He rarely goes into the marketplace. That comes up later on when he goes to Athens. Okay. But we also know that when there was two groups of believers that were inside the community, and this is going to go back to the stoning of Stephen. Let me go back here real quick, and I'm just going to take a minute with this, and then I'll okay. Basically, there were two groups inside the early church. There were Jews who were from the diaspora and those who were not from the diaspora. And look at Acts chapter 6. And again, I'm gonna take a.
You can do this thing too.
No, that's okay. I'm gonna take it just for a minute, and I'm done because I'll lose my thought.
I'll remind you.
No, it's okay. Acts chapter 6 says, in those days, the number of disciples was increasing, and the Grecian Jews, okay, and that was Jews who were Hellenized. They were, and it says they were, among them were complaining about the Hebraic Jews, which means the Jewish Jews, because their widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution of food. Okay. Right? So we have two different tensions inside the church. They're Jewish, one is Grecian, one is.
So my Bible says, now in these days when the disciples were increasing in number, a complaint by the Hellenists arose.
Yeah, the Hellenist Jews are complaining. So
But
the
what you read, you read Jews or just.
right, so my question is that,
Oh, okay.
is the word Hellenist referring to Grecian Jews or just raw Hellenists?
Okay.
That's where I gotta go with it. Okay.
Okay.
And that is, and again, when you're dealing with this, there was two factions that were inside the early church when it came to the church. Again, it's Grecian Jews, non-diaspora Jews, those not in Palestine and those who were in Palestine. And there's tension even among the Jews in Jerusalem between these two groups. And so that is, but the church in Antioch was God-fearing Gentiles who had not been circumcised. They would not go through the full rite to become a Jew. They refused to do that. And that becomes a big buzz. What passage is it? Give me the passage with you just looked at when you're asked about from this study. It was
You mean what you just read?
No, the other one, Acts. What was it? Acts 9.
Why do you think Paul's bold preaching in Jerusalem led to attempts in his life? Is that what you're asking?
No, the one about
the one that had the Hellenists in it.
Well, it's in Acts
No,
9:29, and it just was in Acts 6:1.
Let me, yeah, and again, all we got to do is get it in
I'm
context.
not arguing.
No, not. No, I preach passionately. I'm not.
There's
I'm
another.
not always.
There's another little,
Yeah.
little two,
Okay,
Yeah.
and it says, that is Greek speaking Jews.
so this Acts 9 passage,
20.
29, this Acts 9:29, are we talking about Gentiles, raw Gentiles, or are we talking about Greek speaking Jews? So which
He said he
group,
was speaking
Greek
against that.
speaking Jews.
again, it's that Grecian Jews.
Okay.
So the idea you gotta remember is Jews looked at life this way. There's Jew, Gentile, the nation, all the other nations, right? Okay, that's why when Jesus is, the devil is tempting him, he says, all this I can give to you. He's not talking about Israel. That was in the covenant. All the Gentile nations I can give to you if you bow down and worship me. Because he already has control over the Gentile nations. I got into a big argument with the pastors about that. It was me against everybody else. So the idea is that, but then within the actual community, you're going to have three different groups. Okay, you're going to have Jews who are Hebraic Jews, full Jew. You're going to have a Hellenized Jew who went through circumcision. Hey man, I went through it. I started off as a Gentile, but now I've gone through the full covenant process. What is he arguing with them about? Circumcision. And then you have another group, which is God-fearing Gentiles who have refused to go through circumcision. So those born into it, those who have converted to it, those who attend but won't join. Church has the same dynamic. Those who were born Lutheran, those who have converted to Lutheran, those who are attending the church but don't want to become Lutheran. And who's his big argument group? Those that have converted. And he goes, you didn't need to go through. Really didn't. And again, why does that upset him so much? These Hellenist group Jews. Because they made the sacrifice. And Paul's preaching against that. So he's saying, you didn't have to go through that. Who has a tendency sometimes to be the most passionate about, I'm a converted Methodist to Lutheran, right? Why am I, and sometimes I have a tendency to be the most passionate about that process. Why is that? Man, I made the sacrifice. Right? So that's kind of the, I'm going to take a stab at that, but that's the tension that's going on. And this is going to be his thorn in the flesh throughout most of his ministry. Because what do you mean? I made the sacrifice and you're telling me I didn't have to. I could have had a VA.
He's trying to get them to the point where they take their eyes off themselves, what they've gone through. And
Yes,
to look up.
yes. And he would say something like this: you think you gave up a lot? You got circumcised. Man, I gave up being a Pharisee. Are you kidding me? People don't like to hear that. I'm always interested in a dynamic when you accomplish something and then they always have to one up you. You know anybody like that? And I had a really good golf game. I shot blah, blah, blah. Well, last week I was blah, blah, blah. Okay. All right. Good stuff. And I'm not arguing. I get passionate.
I wonder if this goes to,
I'm dynamic. I'm dramatic.
when Paul's writing in First Corinthians, something about, I can't remember exactly, but the Jews are looking for signs and the Greeks are looking for a reason. And I guess here in this passage with Alinus, he's arguing with them that they're saying, what you're preaching doesn't make any sense to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
Weren't these same Jews that Stephen was preaching to when they got plotted to kill Stephen?
Yes.
So wasn't God trying to make Paul feel like the way Stephen felt when he was about to be killed? Hey, well, what you did to Stephen, how shoes on the other foot.
What they do on Stephen is they come in and they influence the division within the body. The way that the way you split a family is not from within. If you want to break down a church, churches rally when they're persecuted from the outside. Our giving, your giving increased during COVID, right? Why was that? Two reasons. Number one is people weren't taking vacations. What was the other part? You're not going to shut down my church. We lost a lot of people, but the giving went up. Okay? Churches rally when they're challenged from the outside. They melt down from the rot is always on the inside. As Jesus says, a house divided cannot what? Stand. So Satan wants to strike Holy Land Lutheran Church. He's not going to attack us from the outside in. He's going to attack us from the inside out. That's always how he's going to.
Especially the pastor. Target number one.
Thanks, Tom.
Is that not accurate? I mean,
big old bullseye.
you are if you want to beat a team, you beat up the quarterback.
Correct.
Beat him to death.
Yeah, sack the quarterback, get him out of the game,
and hurt him.
Hurt him. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I appreciate it. So you feel good. That's right. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. All right, I'll see you in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Pastor, you'll be glad. We're going to do our first call next week.
Really? Who are you going to call?
They're
going to call Saul, right?
We got six. We got 6 on the list. We tried to get one from North Carolina, but we couldn't. But we got one from South Carolina. But the joke is we're going to call our current vacancy pastor's father.
Yep.
Pastor Toomas. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
So I mean.
Fairland.
Are you?